Taking action or adopting attitudes as a result of real or imagined pressure. This is the genesis for peer pressure. Subjects in groups were asked to match the line lengths. Confederates picked the wrong line. You had two groups, Confederates and Unions. Subjects went with the wrong answer in 37% of the trials, even though they knew that it was wrong. The Asch study. Make sure you know what the Asch study shows. This was the test line, all right? And then you had to circle A, B, or C. Which one is the closest to the test line? And before the test, the subjects were shown that B or C was the right answer. And they went with it, knowing clearly. A third grader could say, no, it's A. See, that's how insecure we are as human beings to be individuals. Groupthink. The tendency for all members of a group to think alike and suppress disagreement for the sake of harmony. In other words, in your group, one person may like chapter, I'm just giving you an example. One person may like chapter 9. One person may like chapter 3. Okay? And the person that likes chapter 9 because the other group members like chapter 3 just may shut up and go with the flow because majority rules. That's groupthink. Watch. Or it may not be an emotional decision. It may be a decision that's based on the importance or the facts that are in the chapter. And students may go with a bad choice just because the majority selects a bad choice. That's called groupthink. And then there are examples of how groupthink almost harmed us significantly. The Bay of Pigs, that's the Cuban Missile Crisis, the escalating war in Vietnam. There were a number of people that did not want to go to war, but then there were a number of people that shut up and went with the flow, went with the crowd. And then there was a Challenger explosion. We're finding out now that there were scientists and engineers that knew that the Challenger was not fit to go into space, but didn't say anything. And then the 2003 invasion of Iraq, there were a number of people that sat on their hands and did not voice their opinion. And here we are going over bombing countries for no reason. Not good. Diffusion of responsibility. We've heard this before. Bystander apathy. You all have probably seen this on Dateline, Nightline, and 48 Hours. There have actually been studies, real life cases and examples of women being violated and sexually assaulted, and the woman is screaming, and people hear the screams, but don't intervene because Kobe thinks Eddie's going to intervene, and Eddie thinks Wasim's going to intervene, and Wasim thinks Carolyn's going to intervene, and Carolyn thinks Melissa's going to intervene, and nobody takes initiative. Everybody passes the buck. That's called the bystander apathy. Apathy means underdevelopment or a form of retardation, stoppage, death, and bystander stoppage is here. In groups or crowds, the loss of awareness. I'm sorry, what's that? I'm sorry. What'd you say, Khalid?
I said, what was the last word on that?
Get that? Now you guys can go home and study this. Don't try to get every word on the slide. This is just a hints for the midterm. All right? In groups or crowds, the loss of awareness of one's own individuality. That is the definition of de-individuation. All right? Individuation is the process of becoming an individual, an independent thinking individual. That's individuation. D means not. De-individuation takes place in groups. and you just go with the flow because you don't want to be an individual. We see this in the hood. Everybody wears the oversized triple, quadruple XL white tees, right? And they walk around with their behind showing, right? And nobody wants to be an individual and say, my man, pull up your pants. That's nasty. Everybody does that, though. And what's interesting is nobody even understands. We're not going to get into it in this class because we got to move. But the people who necessarily decorate themselves a particular way don't even know what the genesis of it is. They don't even know where that style comes from. They're just doing it because of everybody else. In the group, you lose your individuality. That's why it's so easy to spot an individual, can I say it the way I want to say it, who's not a wimp, who's not a punk, but can be his own man in the midst of others.
That's right.
Altruism and dissent. Altruism is the belief that there's an ideal goodness that can come out of, that there exists the potential for an ideal positive outcome. Dissent is basically disagreeing or being combative, okay? Being in disagreement. The conditions that increase the likelihood that some people will dissent from the majority opinion, take risks to help others, or blow the whistle on wrongdoers. Factors that predict independent action and altruism. When would somebody take a stand? Basically, is what altruism and dissent is basically getting at. This slide is saying, when do people stand up? What are the factors that determine whether or not somebody will stand up and not be a wimp or a punk? The first bullet says, when we perceive the need to intervene or to help. There's got to be a sincere and legitimate need to intervene. Hold up, man, that's not right. Hold up, man, leave her alone. Hold up, man, I'm not robbing that man. Hold up, man, I'm not carjacking that person. Hold up, y'all, we shouldn't cheat. Man, I'm not smoking that stuff, even though you all are smoking it. Second bullet, cultural norms encourage you to take action. No, we don't do that in my house. In my house, we don't do that. In my community, we don't do that. You're away at camp. You're away on a foreign missions trip. You're away on a study abroad program. And you have a peer group that's engaging in that's not what we do in my community. But you have an ally. Joel looks at Professor Morgan, and I look at Joel, and he's like, I'm not down with that. And I'm like, no, I'm not down with that either. And we have that. And so now there's strength in numbers. You don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. When you have an ally, that makes it easier for us to dissent. And then last but not least, you become entrapped. You become entrapped. Gotta move. All right. President Kennedy's decision-making process and the resulting Bay of Pigs fiasco is an example of. Are you all familiar with the Bay of Pigs fiasco? The Cuban Missile Crisis? Study it, please. Yes. We had nuclear warheads, atomic warheads facing Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were at war with Castro. He's a communist. We're democrat. We live in a democratic state. We had serious social, political, and economic disagreements with missiles and communism and so on and so forth. And in the Oval Office with President Kennedy's cabinet, there were persons that were not speaking up about the foolishness of sending nuclear warheads to Cuba. Cuba's right off you can swim to Cuba, y'all.
Yes.
From Miami to Cuba, you can swim there. Cubans swim back and forth to Miami all the time when they try to come into the country illegally. You all remember baby Elion? You all may be a little bit too young. He was on a little raft. His mom drowned him, and little Elion, who was 5 years old, paddled his way to Miami. So here we are getting ready to nuke Cuba, and nobody's speaking up saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. They were all just going to go with the flow, and finally cooler heads prevailed, but groupthink is what gets in the way. Nobody has the audacity or the courage or the maturity to stand up.